Great, thank you. Ah, amazing. I like your vibrato. How long have you been working on it for?
Ooh, not very long. I'd say probably like 3 months from the summer.
Yeah, I'm really impressed. It's a really nice tone. I noticed it was starting to have even different like varying speeds, and your hand looks relaxed. So vibrato is a tough one. So nice job on that. I was happy to see it come out in these pieces. I know that it's like this is the time. I always find like book 4 is such a gateway book because it's taking all of the techniques that you kind of learned separately in the first 3 books, and then it's making you put them together and do a lot of different things at once. So even though this piece is only 2 pages long, it has so many different sections with different, first of all, different keys, different sound centers, but then different, you need to play in different parts of the bow, you need to have different dynamics, you need to have different vibrato and kind of different character, right? So it's, I understand. I remember when I learned these pieces and feeling a little overwhelmed. So really nice job getting through it. On that note, I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about the character of the piece because I think your setup looks really good. Have you and Julia talked about ways to approach the different sections, or do you think for you, like, do you know what the sections in the piece are and how you're trying to play them kind of?
Yeah, so I believe, so there's the first section, there's the theme, right?
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards there is, well, the part like the, the triplets essentially, and
Mm-hmm.
that has kind of a different feeling than the main theme. But then there's also when we go into the slower part on the beginning of the second page, and then there's the last part that
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
kind of like 3 chunks, but with mini themes throughout.
Yeah. I would definitely say so. I would say there might even be 3 or 4 is sort of debatable. I think on page 1, when the theme comes back in measure 35, it sort of goes into a bit of a thornier developmental section, and then you have that sort of triplet figure that is pretty different than the more melodic legato line of the opening. And I think that Seitz did this on purpose. He was a pedagogue, and he wrote a lot of concerti for his students. And in some ways, this mimics in sort of a digestible format what all of the major violin concertos of the Romantic era do. They have an exposition of a theme. They have a development. They have some sort of contrasting material, and then they often have sort of a virtuosic ending. So he wants you to already sort of preparing you for what's to come, but he does it all in first position. And he does it in a way that you can practice these techniques very separately. So when I saw your playing, I I thought that the bass line was really great, and I would love for you to feel a little bit more risky in going to more extremes in each of the three sections, and differentiating the way that you're playing each section. And if you didn't have a good setup, I wouldn't be telling you this yet. So this is kind of next step. And for the sake of time, I'd love to take you for an hour and go through each of the four sections and be like, okay, so what's the character here? Let's talk about page 2. Let's go to the section that is at measure 60. And if you had to assign a word to the character of this section, what would you, I mean, they give you a couple words, but what are you thinking about when you're playing this section?
I think like it's very romantic. In my head, I kind of think of like a lady from the 1700s in a big dress walking through her garden.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and the dynamics are also different than the previous sections, right? We have the piano dynamic. So I would take this section, and you have this beautiful blossoming vibrato that you're working on. And oh, thank you, Julia. Yeah, so for the other members, I'm talking about measure 60, tranquillo e dolce. And I would give yourself a challenge to play through it once, vibrating on every single note. Even if you have to slow down the tempo, even if you have to slow down the rhythm, this isn't the way you'd perform it, but it's the way you'd practice it. And I'd also give you permission with your bow. I was just talking with Jeanne about staying up near the bridge, but I would give you permission to actually move your bow a little bit closer to the fingerboard and have what we call a sul tasto sound, which is letting a little bit more air into your sound. And if you're a lady in a nice dress with maybe the breeze is moving through her fabric, I think a little bit of air in your sound here could actually be really nice, and it could be a really interesting character. Let me play the beginning of it with that sound type, and then I'll get you to try playing it for me once with as much vibrato as you can manage and a slightly sort of drier, airier tone in your bow. So I don't know, something like this maybe. That's just an idea. Now your turn.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you get a little bit quieter for me?
Yeah.
But your vibrato was great. That was beautiful. And actually, maybe one of the ways, maybe by getting quieter, you actually start in the middle of the bow or just below the middle rather than right at the frog, because I think the frog can be a pretty intense place to start. Maybe I apologize, Julia, if you told her to use her whole bow here. Yeah, try it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and kind of stay, that slow bow is great, but if you use less bow, your sound is naturally going to get quieter. So let's see if that helps. Keep the vibrato intense. Keep the vibrato. I know it's like a patty. It's like one of these things. I know. So intense vibrato, upper half of the bow. Good, good, good. So then we run into some problems with bow distribution, and you're like, oh my goodness. But I did like that sound as a bass line. And I'll give you one more tip, and I'll let you, this would be the next step that you could work on after the master class is over. So for me, that would be like our baseline color of this section. And then whenever there are crescendos in the music, which there are ones in measure 62, 66, and a big one at 76, that's where you increase the amount of bow that you use. You use the whole bow, and when you use the whole bow, suddenly we go from this piano color into a swell, and that's how we get our dynamic. And then on the decrescendos, we go back to our less bow, more subdued in the upper half. So if you think of your bow as sort of, to use your metaphor, if we think of it as the wind or the breeze, as you're making these phrases, you have a more limited bow as your bass line. And then as it crescendos, you get to use the whole bow, and then you go back to the safety of kind of your bass line area of bow. The tricky part of this is having varying bow while you're continuing a vibrato. I'm sort of this, sometimes for my students, we don't do this until a bit later on. So, but I think that the idea of that character and coming up with that character for each section is going to be really, really helpful to you. Let's do the same thing a little bit for the fourth section. What do you think about when you think of this section?
It's very like jumpy. I kind of was thinking of like little flames like jumping around, like very dance.
Yeah, it's also very fiddly, right?
Yeah.
This moment here in 87, where it has those open strings. I used to play a lot of bluegrass fiddle growing up, so we used to call this a Texas bow bobble. And there's a lot of fiddle music that does exactly this. Actually, that's a Bach, but I'm trying to remember what the devil that. Anyway, whenever I get to that part, it reminds me of the bluegrass tune Devil's Dream. And I think that if we think of this section as being like a fiddle tune, oh, it's going to be so dramatic and fun after that like beautiful subdued kind of feminine section that came before it. And I noticed you got a little scared at the end. This is where you need to do the opposite. You need a little bit of cockiness, and you need to be like, I'm a fiddle player. The perfection doesn't matter as much. If anything, I'm going to rev the engine a little bit, and I'm going to push through this part that's really hard, because it's going to give you the energy. Because I felt it. You felt like, this is harder at the end with these double stops. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to be more refined. I think that if your character here is a little bit wild, you're going to find the confidence you need to finish up this section, even if it's not perfect.
But it's energetic.
it's energetic. It's energetic. So let's go. Let me just hear. Yeah, let me hear this. Let me hear this section again. I want to take whatever tempo you're comfortable with, but I think that this needs to be louder, forte a little bit. We call it like robust or pesante. You know, a little bite to your bow, and I'll have you do the section. Go until yeah. Play me the whole section again. Let me hear.
So from basically like 75, 6, 7, 8, 79.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll stop you actually, because I had another idea now that I see you playing it again. I want you to play in sort of the opposite part of the bow that you were playing for section 3. So section 3 was very on the string, very legato, very sort of middle upper half of the bow. This is lower half of the bow. It's kind of bitey, and I would like you to stay below the midpoint when you play this. Can you try somewhere down there in the bow? Here I'll let you use more bow because it's really loud and it's slurred. So you can go. Okay, keep going. But don't slow down. Don't slow down. Yes, good. It's better. It's a lot better. And when you play down in the lower half of the bow like that, your bow actually on the bow bobble, it was starting to happen, which is exciting. It starts to naturally sound a little bit off the string. We call it sort of like a sautille stroke. It's sort of like the bow is starting to jump. And Julia has done a really nice job with you on your hand placement on the bow. Your fingers were responding passively. I didn't see a lot of tension, which is great. I think you're ready to start doing some work in this lower part of the bow like this. A quick technical thing, I did notice when you were in the lower half of the bow as you were moving to the other strings, you kept your elbow low. So if you keep your elbow in a straight line with your wrist as you move across the different planes, it's going to give you more control as the bow starts to bounce a little bit, but it gives that sort of rustic, energetic quality to this last movement. So if third section is beautiful legato lady dress moving in a garden, this is sort of like a country dance. And then the first half is honestly it's a little more difficult. It's not quite as clear, but I would encourage you with Julia to come up with some mental imagery to help you get through those other sections as well. And I think it's going to give a lot more energy. And the ending you played for me now was already a lot more confident than the first time you played it too. So yeah, congratulations. And you're responding really quickly too. So I don't think that this would take I don't think that this would be months of work. I think with a careful week or two, you could begin to add some really cool musical stuff into this concerto.
And it feels a lot better too. Like just the end, like playing in the lower half, it's a lot easier to play that like jumpy part, the like bluegrassy bit.
Yeah.
Like it feels so much better.
It's also easier to catch the bow as a double stop. It gives some weight, and it gives a little bit of a twang too, which for me I like. So I would encourage you to kind of move in that direction and be like, okay, I'm playing a fiddle piece kind of at the end. And yeah, the eighth notes at the end too are great. Do you have any questions for me?
I have a really quick question for, okay, so the theme at the beginning is the theme at the beginning, but in terms of like the triplets at the end of the page, so starting from, let's say, measure 43 to the end, so basically the first note of measure 56,
Yeah.
um, how would you recommend playing that? Like as it would be with the first theme, or is that a kind of separate thing?
I think that there are two different bow strokes you're going to need in order to play the exposition and the development on page one, because I think that the triplets that start in measure 52 are the same triplets that come up briefly in Julia. Could you move in measure 30? And I've seen teachers teach this a couple different ways. With younger students, sometimes they've done it in the upper half of the bow as like staccato strokes, not off the string. I think that you're ready to begin to do it a little bit lower in the bow, like we did the final section as well. And I can't quite remember how you did them. I think you did them on the string staccato when you played them for me the first time. But if you want to investigate what an off the string sound might be, let me see how I might play. It's been a while since I've taught this one, and I think when I learned it, I also was taught the staccato, because this off the string bow is sometimes taught a bit later. Uh, if you're going at a fast enough tempo, if you can manage to do those triplets, in the lower half of the bow, and Julia, you can jump in here if I'm sort of jumping the gun a bit in your teaching.
Go right ahead.
If I were performing, that's how I would play these. And so you can ask Julia to work a little bit on a sautille stroke in your lesson, but even just getting comfortable playing them short, but down here, instead of, I think it's more appropriate, and I think it gives more contrast. And I think it also links the fourth movement to the opening of the piece, because you're sort of foreshadowing the bow stroke that you end up finishing the concerto with. In the places where you have slurs over the triplets, you have to save the bow quite a bit in the lower half on the two down bows. And then you have to, on the up, I do something that's called a colle. I sort of slightly jump off the string. So I go. And then I try to quiet it down so I don't make an accent, but I'm still doing a little bit of a jump. It's something to consider. I think that's less difficult in the second page, because you don't have you have like three notes in the slur at a time, so you don't have to save your bow the same way, because if you don't save your bow on the down bows, you'll go past the balance point and you'll get to the tip and you won't have any ability to bounce or play off the string. Is that helpful?
It is helpful. That actually like helps a lot because
Okay.
I know like even when I was listening to different people playing the piece, everyone kind of plays it differently. And I noticed that it sounds really like what you mentioned with if I play it more like soutien in the first part, it kind of links that to the second part as well. It's like a theme that comes back and you're like, oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
So I think musically that makes it really beautiful.
Both are super acceptable ways of learning. It really depends on the technical comfort of the student when they get to this piece. I'm also not, Julia has more Suzuki training, so it is possible that when Suzuki did this, they get you to still stay on the string. But I think in the context of seeing this as sort of a pre-professional concerto, if the student is able to, I would use this as an opportunity to discuss some off the string bow techniques. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you so
Cool.
much.
Yeah. Thanks, Olivia.